Hey team, I'm gonna record some tutorials for you. So first up, I'm gonna show Jack shot 1, 2, 2 in Final Battle. So let's grab the footage for that. We can just drag that into the project panel here. Once you've got it, drag your footage down onto the new composition button right here. This will create a new composition based on the settings of your footage, which is 4K. So let's just watch through our shot, see what we've got here. We're going to be adding just the storm in front of and behind Jody here. So in order to put stuff behind and in front of her, we needed to cut her out with rotoscoping. So there's two ways to rotoscope in After Effects. You can use your pen tool right up here and just start clicking your mask, and if you drag your mouse you can create a rounded edge, and if you just click once you can create a sharp corner edge. So you can do this for every single frame, and I'm just doing it very loosely right now, but once you complete your path it'll cut her out, and we can see the settings of this mask if we open up our layer settings here, go down to mask. You can also just hit M to open this up. And right now this mask is only on the first frame, so throughout the rest of our shot it's not moving, and if we were to move this mask it would stay in that position throughout the whole time. So we want to animate this, so we just hit the stopwatch next to mask path, and that will set a keyframe on the frame that we hit the stopwatch on. And now that the stopwatch is activated, every time we are on a different spot on the timeline and move our mask around, it sets a keyframe. So when we go back through the timeline, it'll animate between all these different keyframes. So what I like to do is turn my mask off from add mode to none, so that we're just seeing the outline of the mask, but it's not actually applying to the footage. And here I can more accurately trace the outline here. And this is kind of the most basic way to approach masking and rotoscoping. So for simpler stuff, you can just go ahead and straight mask it like this. But the next way to rotoscope is with the Rotobrush tool. So I'll just duplicate my footage layer here with Control D, and I'm going to hide that one underneath. And so this one I'm going to delete my mask on, and I'm going to use the Rotobrush tool, which is right up here. And so with my Rotobrush tool selected, you just double click on the layer. You can do that in here or on the layer itself, and this will take you from the composition tab into the layer tab. So now we're only looking at this layer that we have selected. And now we can use our Rotobrush tool. So we've got this green circle. If we hold down Control and click and drag, we can change the size of our brush, and if we hold down Alt we can invert our brush. So what we want to do is add a brush stroke over the area that we want to roto. So I'm just generally outlining her, and you don't want to accidentally paint outside the edge, because as soon as you do it's going to include that information in your roto. So I'm going to undo that with Control Z, and so I'm going to invert my brush to deselect the parts that I do not want. And this is great for hard edges like her jacket here, but with the soft edges like the hair, it gets trickier, and that's where we'll want to use the Refine Edge tool. So if you click and hold on your Rotobrush tool, you can go to your Refine Edge tool, and then just paint the Refine Edge overlapping your Rotobrush, the purple stroke, but also include all of the hair. So this is going to try to get those little hairs, and this is a real big piece here, so I'm going to push the Refine Edge tool all the way out, and then you might have to mess with this a bit to get good looking results, but this is kind of what it does. It looks on the inside of the Rotobrush, and on the inside it tries to make it white, and then by the time it goes outside it makes it black. And so this is the refined edge, so it's not just this hard edge. And so this is the first frame that we've done, and it automatically sets a keyframe on our brush strokes that we've done. And so I'm going to go to the next frame, and you can do that with Control arrow or page down or Command arrow if you're on a Mac. And it automatically finds the position in the next frame, so there's not much additional work to do. This is looking really good. But something else, I'm getting this warning here. This yellow warning says it wants us to be in full resolution for best results. So I'm going to go back to my composition tab. Right now I'm just previewing this composition in third quality, and so I'm going to change that to full quality. It will run a little bit slower, but it'll give you the best rotobrush results. So I'll go back to my layer, and it's recreating those frames that I've started with all the way up to the frame I'm on now. So I'm just going to go back through these, and it's looking really good. And so just go frame by frame and look at each one, see if any major errors pop up. If it accidentally includes something that you don't want, paint that out. And see, by this frame, I don't need all of this area covered with my Refine Edge tool because her hair is not over there anymore. So I will use my Refine Edge tool, holding Control and dragging to make my brush bigger, holding Alt to invert my brush, and painting just a large inverted brush stroke to remove that area, and then page down to go on to the next frame. So when the light flickers in this scene, it seems to mess up the rotobrush a lot. So pretty much every time the light changes significantly, you'll have to redo some brush strokes, especially on the Refine Edge. So you'll see it lost this section of the hair here, so I'm just gonna paint that back in. And then something weird happened here, so I'm just gonna erase this entire section here and then repaint it. And it looks like it's also including a little bit of gray on this book, and now it's gotten this fireplace too. So I wanted to remove that from my Refine Edge. So I'm inverting, holding down Alt, removing that brush stroke, but I still want to include the hair, so find that middle ground. Looks pretty nice. Let me just clean this up. It's still looking pretty good. Okay, and that's where it comes in, is that light flash. So this frame is good, but this frame I'm going to go back to my Refine Edge tool, and I'm just going to remove all of these. Redefine this. First I want to make sure my roto edge is good, and yeah, it looks pretty good. So I'll just repaint my refined edge. And I don't need to include the jacket here because that's a hard edge. It doesn't need that soft fall off that the hair needs. Okay. So you'll see it deleted all of the frames that it generated after that, because now we've changed the definition of what it's looking for. And depending on your computer, you know, especially with the resolution of this footage in full quality, this might go pretty slow on your machine if it's not very powerful. So you could change it back to like half resolution or quarter resolution if it's just taking too long. But you know, ideally we can work on this at full resolution just for this roto, so that we're giving it as much pixel information as we can to generate the best roto edge. Okay, and I keep removing this section that I shouldn't. It's okay. It's actually a perfect shot to start with, because the hair is really tricky in this, especially with the flashing lights. Okay, so we've gotten through all of our frames, and I'm happy with how they look. And this is the most important step, is to freeze all of this work that you've done, because if we were to save and reopen this project, it would have to take all that time to regenerate all of these green frames. So this little button right here, the freeze button, super important that you hit that once you're done, and it'll bake all of these line data into your project file so that you don't have to regenerate all these frames. So if your project is taking a ridiculously long time to load a frame, it may be trying to regenerate all your roto frames because you may have forgotten to freeze your roto. Okay, cool. So that's been frozen. We'll go back to our composition tab and we can see how that looks. I'll close the twirl down of my layer and I've got my roto layer right here. So now I can put anything in front of or behind it. And that is how you use RotoBrush. And if you're not seeing this grid background, you can hit this little grid button right here. Instead of showing black, it'll show your transparency. So for the edges of my roto, I can go in and refine the settings here. So let me bring the feather up, and that's the softness of the edge. And just go ahead and play around with these settings a lot. I actually want to get it really soft, so bringing down the contrast and bringing up the feather will soften that edge a lot. Yeah, so having that blurrier edge, see the difference there. Okay, kind of liking how that's looking. Not liking this harsh edge here. I think that's because the refine edge stopped there, so maybe it would be good to have the refine edge trace the edge. Okay, something else we can do is I want to use this roto layer, and then I want to blur the roto on top of that. So actually I'll use a channel blur. Let me see if this works. Because I just want to blur the alpha channel, which is just the edges of fading off. So alpha blurriness, I'll go 50, just do an extreme to see. Okay, so that's gone and blurred our alpha edge by a lot. So let me dial that back to, let's say 10. I think that's kind of landing somewhere nice. Oh. What is that? What is going on? Alright, it looks like the chatter reduction on the roto tool is not good. So let me turn that off. And maybe this one too. Yeah, you know, that reduced chatter usually just ends up making it worse. Let me just watch our roto here. Okay, so I would call this acceptable. You know, there's not any major issues with it. It certainly could be better, but I think this is pretty much as good as we can get with RotoBrush, at least. So that's our roto layer, and we'll add all the atmosphere in between and in front of her.